Minister, your address in the forum today is indeed demonstrates to us your interest in the welfare of the African community groups in Ireland.
Thank you very much, Denny. Just whispered to me there, Fáilte. So, the Fáilte of Galir and Shop, the Corge in Africa, and this by Kate Mil Fáilte, Rusha, Galir. I'm delighted to have the opportunity of addressing you here today. It's always a pleasure to deal. I don't blame myself. The chair should have told me not to have that. And I want to thank very much the Africa Centre and Akigwa for hosting this particular meeting here today, this forum today. Dublin City Council, of course, who are the hosts of the building, and all the other organisations that are part of the support structure for this meeting, the Africans in the Changing Ireland. And I was listening to what Benny and what Richard have been saying already, and I must say I agree entirely with the sentiments that have been expressed. At this point in time, we have a very rich African diaspora here in Ireland. Some 65,000 Africans here from the last census, and that is something that is new to our culture, that is new to our society, something that we did not have 50 years ago. So we have to look at it in terms of what Ireland has gained. We have to look at it in terms of what the new diaspora has to offer, because Ireland, of all the countries in the world, probably has the largest diaspora. And this year, we are celebrating that diaspora. We have created the Gathering, which is a year-long celebration of Irishness here in Ireland, where we're inviting the 70 million Irish people, or people of Irish descent, who are in the United States alone, to come back to Ireland. Now, of course, we don't expect them to all arrive at the same time, but we are open to our Irish diaspora, and the Irish diaspora is all over the world. So we always consider the diaspora as a rich part of our history, our tradition, our culture. So it is important that each country that's represented here from Africa, that they are represented in their own individual capacity in the first instance, and that they bring the richness of their heritage, of their history, of their culture, of their music, of their dance to Ireland. But also, by doing that, that they come in a collective diaspora capacity from the continent of Africa as well. Because there are so many other things that can be done on a collective basis that cannot be done on an individual basis. And that's really, I think, why we're here today, to look at the African diaspora in terms of its interaction with Ireland and in terms of our interaction with it. And that's what I am, as Minister for Trade and Development, I'm particularly anxious to pursue myself. And from that point of view, I'd be delighted to hear what Gibril Fall has to say, Gibril, is it? Gibril has to say from the United Kingdom and the ideas that he has to bring to us from their experience there. But as we say in Ireland, Níl neart go cur na céile. There's no strength until people come together and work together. And that is part of what we'd like to see happening from the diaspora. So I'd like to say a few things about my own department, about how Irish Aid, that I'm responsible for, and the New Africa strategy, how that operates, and how I think it can integrate with the diaspora, and how the new policy that we are putting in place at the present time, and which I hope to launch before the end of this year, how it fits into the picture itself. So, as I said, part of my job as Minister for Trade and Development, I have responsibility for Irish Aid, and I'm anxious to see the diaspora's role in that development area. So Irish Aid is the government's overseas aid programme, which works in developing countries to fight the causes of poverty and hunger, and to fight poverty and hunger themselves. And Ireland, from its own background, has always concentrated. We have a number of priorities, but one of our biggest priorities has always been what we call the hunger agenda. We put a greater percentage of our overseas development aid into dealing with hunger and poverty than virtually any other country in the world. That's why the concentration of Irish aid is in sub-Saharan Africa, where 80% of Irish aid is spent. And that really goes back to our own legacy of the famine in the 19th century, when very large numbers of our own people died here, and very large numbers, of course, immigrated, and that originated from that of the Irish diaspora itself. So this year, the Irish government is allocating 623 million to Ireland's overseas development programme. It's roughly 0.5%, and as you know, the target, the United Nations target that has been set as part of the Millennium Development Goals is 0.7%. Now, there are only 4 countries in the world that have achieved that target, and we are, at the present time, we are still, despite the bailout situation we're in, we are joint 7th in the world in terms of our per capita development aid. So, in that sense, we have been able to stabilise the situation, and we've been able to maintain a good degree of the target, or to reach a good degree of the target, despite the difficult economic circumstances. And we intend to continue, as times get better, to achieve the target at least. So most of the work that we do takes place in our 9 partner countries, and 7 are in Africa, 2 are in Asia, in Vietnam and in Timor-Leste. It is important that we all understand the potential for development assistance to bring real and lasting change to developing countries. It is equally important that we understand that Ireland has a partnership with Africa that is not just about assistance, but is also about trade and broad economic and political development. Africa in particular is generating remarkable economic growth at the present time, at a rate not foreseen only a decade ago. It is by far the fastest growing percentage-wise of all economies in the world at the present time, despite the stories that we hear most about, is about the Asian tigers. There's a whole continent of Africa, but there's quite a number of African tigers. I might use that word. Maybe the African lion, perhaps, is more appropriate. Anyway, the poor old Irish tiger has disappeared, so it's good to see that there are animals alive and abroad elsewhere. So in 5 years, in the first years of the new millennium, over the last decade or so, despite the financial crisis in other areas, the annual economic growth in Africa has been in the region of 5% on average right across the continent. And with this growth and development has come opportunities for trade and a stronger role for emerging economies in world affairs. So the Africa strategy is the strategy of my department, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. It was launched last year, last autumn, the autumn before 2011, November 2011. And the first Africa-Ireland Economic Forum took place last year. And it builds on Ireland's long-standing relationship with Africa. It is based on political support and the Irish people's commitment to working to end poverty and hunger in some of the poorest countries in the continent. It explicitly recognises the role which greater economic and trade cooperation can make to relations between Ireland and Africa and to development in Africa. I must say, I met nearly all of the African countries in Addis Ababa last year at the meeting of the African Union, and each and every one of them was enthusiastic about what could be achieved by greater engagement in trade and investment between developed countries and developing countries, and they want to see this particular area of development enhanced and broadened. Underlining our strengthened focus on contacts with Africa last year, I led trade-focused visits to South Africa, to Ghana and Nigeria. It was a particular pleasure to lead the first trade mission from Ireland to West Africa in over 20 years. And the development of stronger links in that region will remain an objective this year under the Africa strategy. I feel there is a great opportunity for the private sector too to play a more important role in developing sustainable economic growth in countries such as Ghana and Nigeria, for example. I recently visited Tema Port in Ghana, one of the ports that is benefiting from the advice and experience of the Dublin Port Company and the Harbour Commissioners in Belfast and again in Cork. And yesterday I met representatives from Dublin Port Company, which is engaged with UNCTAD, the United Nations body, in putting together a programme to improve skills and management of ports throughout the world. And Ireland is very much engaged in doing so with Africa at the present time. Ghana, Takoradi, Tema Port, Tanzania. We've also been dealing with Indonesia and the Maldives. But we were discussing now how to look at the broader picture with the entirety of the ports in Africa and how that could so much benefit the trade relations, because a lot of the ports in Africa are very congested, difficult for perishable goods to be processed pretty quickly, and there's a lot of work being done there. And as some of you may know, 80% of the urban areas in Africa are on the coast, so there's a huge maritime coastal urban population in Africa. And this is a very exciting new area where all the ports in Ireland, and Limerick Port is coming in on it at the present time, is assisting in the programme of education and training that we're engaged with at the present. So these are areas where we can do some complementary work. What struck me most from my visits was the rapid pace of change at an economic level and the strong entrepreneurial spirit that I witnessed, and that is everywhere in Africa at the present time. On matters nearer home, raising awareness and understanding among people here in Ireland about development issues and about the realities and challenges for many of our partner countries in Africa and Asia is a very important part of what Irish Aid does. We need to ensure better public engagement on development issues here in Ireland and ownership of our aid efforts. As members of the diaspora groups, you will be well aware of the Irish public's perception of developing countries, and sometimes these are outdated and inaccurate, and sometimes have to change. And indeed, from our own point of view, as our chair said there a minute ago, she was one of those black babies. Sometimes we still think in terms of the black babies in Africa, and I think we need a much more broader, more complex, more updated view of the African picture and of African society. As you are aware, a review of the White Paper on Irish Aid was initiated in 2011. I am delighted to say that diaspora communities actively participated in the public consultation during the review. A particularly welcomed consultation meeting which was jointly organised by the New Communities Partnership in February of last year. This brought out a number of issues which we are taking into consideration in our deliberations, and we are now finalising the new policy, and we hope to launch it in the coming weeks. My department is also delighted to support Africa Aid, which has become a significant event in the national calendar, with activities occurring in Dublin, Cork, Limerick and Galway. And of course this would not be possible without the enthusiastic backing and involvement of the African diaspora in these activities. So there's an example of how Africa as a continent can participate all together in what is now a national day here in Ireland, Africa Day, and I'm looking forward to seeing events taking place in every town and city in Ireland. And it's becoming quite a successful event on the annual calendar here in Ireland at the present time. To conclude, I would like to re-emphasise some important messages. Firstly, African communities in Ireland form a key part of Irish society and have a very important role to play in influencing Irish policy development, as we did during the development of our new aid policy. Secondly, we have much to learn from Africa in terms of economic growth and in making our development assistance more relevant and effective. Thirdly, I would like to emphasise the important role of all of you can play in increasing the understanding and knowledge of Africa here in Ireland, and the challenges it faces, but also the many positives. So thank you once again for the invitation to speak. Wish you very well in your deliberations, and I certainly was delighted to hear what you just said, Chair, in relation to the need for structures to be put in place so that a forum like this is part of the structure, can, just not be a talking shop that we deal with, we talk about it and think that we have achieved something, that we also must put ongoing structures in place that can lead to actual implementation of the discussions that have taken place, so that these issues that are now being articulated here today in relation to engagement by Africa in Ireland, Ireland in Africa, the social issues, the economic issues, the employment issues, the cultural issues, how the African diaspora is going to move forward in the Irish context. All of this is extremely important, how we are going to engage, how we in Irish Aid are going to engage with Africa, how we build on what our missionaries did, what Irish Aid has been doing in the past, what perhaps our Irish private sector can do in the future, and can do in engagement in terms of business and trade with Africa. What is key to all of that is the part of the engagement. And what we have done so far, I hope, in our relationships with Africa, has been what I call an ethical engagement. And I'm particularly keen that as we move forward, that we retain that tradition of ethical engagement with all of the countries in Africa, with the African people, both in Africa and the diaspora here. And I think structures for like this are wonderful for people to begin to discuss these issues and to plan and plot a way forward for all of us, both for the Irish people and for the very welcome Irish African diaspora here in Ireland. So thank you very much.